Good morning, everyone. I apologize for the delay. We are learning Mishna Bava Kamma, Parakeh, Chapter 5, Mishna, Mishnah 5. HaChayfer bar b'rishus hayachid. If a person digs a pit in a private domain, u'fesacha b'rishus harabim, and opens it to the public domain. So again, let's just get the words here. The words read, a person is digging a pit in a private domain and opens it to a public domain. The meaning of that, as explained here, is that this person digs a pit in the public domain at an angle so that the floor of the pit is in his own property. That's the case. He actually dug from the public domain. The hole is in the public domain, but he dug at an angle so the bottom of the pit is in his private domain. Okay? Now, as they explain here, since the pit opens into the public domain, an animal walking in the public domain could fall into it. That's your liability. The animal has a right to walk in the public domain, and therefore the pit that you dig there is your liability. That's the first case. Oy b'rishus harabim, or he digs the pit in the public domain, u'p'sachar l'rishus hayachid, and its opening is to the private domain. So again, following the same pattern as before, you actually dug in the private domain, and the bottom of the pit is in the public domain. Now here already, things get a little bit more gets a little bit more complicated, because in this case, if the opening of the pit is in your private domain, then that animal that fell in, what was it doing in your private domain? And therefore, that's a problem. The Mishna is going to say you're liable in this case. Why? And therefore, as brought down here in the notes, and based on what the Kamma explains, Martinur brings down, the actual case is that you gave up ownership of the area around the opening of the pit. You dug the pit, and then the area around the pit, which was your private property, you rendered it ownerless. You rendered it hefker. And I'm assuming, therefore, and the case here is that it abuts up to the public domain. And therefore, anybody and any animal that's walking the public domain now has permission to walk into the area where the pit is. And therefore, when it fell in because of the fact that it had a right to be there, and you dug a pit there. But in the last case of the Mishnah is, he has two private domains. He has two areas of property he owns next to each other. Again, following the same pattern as before, he digs the pit in one domain on an angle so that the bottom is in a different domain. In all these cases, chayav, you're liable. And in the third case again, in order to be liable, it has to be that the area where the pit is open to, you rendered it ownerless, so now it's considered part of the public domain that the animal can go there, and therefore you're liable for it. So in all these cases, the point here is, as they bring down here in the notes, in summary, it makes no difference where one digs a pit. It makes no difference where the bottom of the pit is, the top of the pit is, as long as its opening is accessible to the public, either because you dug in the public domain or because you render that area ownerless, the digger is liable for any damage it causes. Now the Mishnah continues. HaChayfer bar b'rishus harabim. Now, in this case, you dug the bar, this pit in the public domain. The hole is in the public domain, the bottom is in the public domain. And a ox, a donkey fell in and died. Chayav, you're liable. Now, the point here is that, again, we're talking about a public domain. The animal had the right to be there. But the thing is that there's nothing about this pit that belongs to you. It's completely ownerless. And therefore, the Mishnah tells us that although you don't own anything here, nonetheless, it's a public area. Nonetheless, you dug the pit, it becomes like it's yours. You're liable for it. You're responsible for it. Mishnah continues. Echad ha'chayfer bar, whether one digs a bar means a pit. A pit means a round hole in the ground. Or he digs a siach. A siach is a ditch, which is a long and narrow pit. Or he digs a ma'ara, which they translate as a vault, a square pit covered with a roof in which there is an opening. That's why something fell in. That is ma'ara. Charitzin. Charitzin means square pits that are covered. Uni'itzin. Ni'itzin they translate as wedge-like pits that are wide on top and narrow at the bottom. Chayiv. In all these cases, he's obligated to pay for the damage that they cause. Makes no difference what the shape is. But then the Mishnah asks, Im kain, if so, lama nemar bar. Why did the Torah choose, when it spoke about this hole, it called it a bar, which means a round hole? Why, if it doesn't have to be a round hole, it could be any hole, why use the word bar? Why did the Torah choose bar as an example of the hole that you're liable for the animal that falls in and dies? That the answer is, ma bar sheyesh bo kedei lahamis. Just as a bar typically has the capacity to cause an animal that falls in to die, because asar tfachim, it's typically 10 tfachim deep. 10 tfachim, which is about 40 inches deep, is considered deep enough to cause an animal to die. The Mishnah understands that a bar is typically that deep. If people dig bars, which are typically holes if people dig holes like that, and typically you dig a round hole, that hole is going to be at least 10 tefachim deep. So bar is an example of something that's at least 10 tefachim deep. It's there that the Torah says an animal is going to be liable for death. And therefore, that now sets the example of how deep does the hole have to be responsible if an animal falls in and dies. Just as a bar has the capacity to kill because it has a depth of 10 tefachim, so to any other kind of hole that has the capacity to kill, asar tefachim, because it's 10 tefachim deep, you'll be liable. So the Torah used the example of bar for a pit because the Torah wanted to set the premise to say that you'll be liable for a hole that an animal falls in if it's like a pit, which means it's at least 10 tefachim deep. Because that's the amount, that's the depth that can cause an animal, the Torah is telling us that can cause an animal to die. Now, let's say the holes that we're talking about here are less than 10 tefachim deep. And an ox or a donkey fell in, and should mention before, when Mishnah talks about an ox and a donkey, it's not only those animals specifically you're liable for, it's any animal. So v'nafal l'seicha shar chamar v'meis, and a shar or a chamar, an ox or a donkey fell in and died, pater, you're going to be exempt. Because if it's less than 10 tefachim, then such a hole typically does not kill an animal. If the animal died, then died for whatever reason it died, but you can't be blamed for the animal's death because such a death, it's unexpected that the animal should die there. And therefore, though you went ahead and you dug the hole, that hole you dug was not expected, it should not have killed the animal, and therefore you're not held responsible for it. But if, let's say, what happened is the animal got damaged, so less than 10 tefachim is a depth that can damage an animal that falls in, and if that's what happens, chayiv, you're obligated to pay for it. Have a wonderful day.